Ethan Carrington stared at the thick, cream-colored envelope on his mahogany desk. The gold-embossed lettering of Olivia's new last name, almost his last name, seemed to mock him with every swirl and curve. He picked it up, fingers trembling, and traced the delicate script that once would have belonged to him. His office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and glassy skyline view, felt too large and too quiet. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual indifference. Inside, Ethan's world had frozen to a single point. You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Olivia Bennett and Samuel Hayes. Samuel, his former best friend, the one who had stood beside him through mergers and deals and late-night whiskey-fueled plans. The one who had held Ethan's trust, and now Olivia's hand. Ethan clenched his jaw, the muscles twitching. He remembered Olivia's laugh, light and musical, echoing in the empty halls of the mansion that now felt more like a tomb. The laughter had died when he'd pushed her away, driven by ambition, by the need to build an empire that no one could touch. Even her. Especially her. He dropped the invitation, the paper making a soft, mocking sound as it hit the desk. Guilt, coiled in his chest, a viper that refused to stay buried. He'd told himself he was too busy, too focused, too important to be tied down by love. But now, with her name written in gold and another man at her side, he felt the brittle edges of his own pride. A knock on the door broke the silence. Sophia's quiet voice followed, hesitant but warm. "Mr. Carrington, the caterer is on the line. Should I?" He turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. Sophia stood in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back, her posture a careful blend of deference and grace. She was a constant in his life, a quiet presence who moved through his home like a shadow, seen but never fully noticed. He swallowed hard. "No, let them wait," he said, his voice colder than he intended. He saw her flinch, and something inside him shifted, a memory of how Olivia used to flinch when he raised his voice. Sophia stepped forward, her eyes gentle but questioning. "Is everything all right, sir?" Ethan hesitated, the words catching in his throat. He thought of the invitation, the laughter that would fill that wedding hall, the faces that would turn to watch Olivia walk down the aisle. He thought of Samuel's, hand on her back, guiding her forward, taking what was once his. A reckless idea flared in his mind, born of pride and old wounds. "Sophia," he began, his tone softer now, "would you consider accompanying me to a wedding this weekend?" Her eyes widened, the question catching her off guard. "A wedding, sir?" "Yes." He straightened his jacket, forcing a smile that felt as thin as paper. "My ex-fiancée is getting married to a friend of mine." His voice dipped, brittle with something that might have been regret. "I'd appreciate the company." Sophia's brow furrowed, her lips parting as if to protest. But then she saw something in his eyes, a vulnerability she'd never glimpsed before. She nodded slowly. "Of course, Mr. Carrington, if that's what you wish. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word and tell us where you're watching from." He exhaled, the tension easing just slightly. "Good. Thank you." As she turned to leave, her small, knowing smile lingered in his mind. There was something in that smile he couldn't quite name, a quiet strength, a secret hidden beneath the surface. When she closed the door, Ethan let the mask slip. His reflection stared back from the glass, haunted, uncertain, a man who had once believed he could outrun the past. Outside, the city lights glimmered like promises he'd made and broken. And as he picked up the invitation once more, his hand trembled. He didn't know why he'd asked Sophia. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe it was something darker, a need to prove he was still in control of his own story. Either way, he knew one thing. This wedding would be no ordinary event. And in the shadows of his empire, old wounds were beginning to fester. Sophia stood in the soft glow of her modest bedroom, the hum of the city beyond her window a distant murmur. The silence here was comforting, a stark contrast to the polished marble and whispered secrets of Ethan's world. She traced her fingers along the handle of the small, worn suitcase that sat open on her bed. A simple black dress, her only one, that might pass for a wedding guest's attire, lay folded neatly beside a pair of sensible heels. Everything about her life was practical, measured, hidden. She paused, her reflection staring back from the cracked mirror. A young woman with eyes too old for her face, lips pressed together against secrets that had lived too long in the dark. Ethan's request had caught her off guard. His vulnerability had seeped into his words like a wound, and despite everything, she'd agreed. The truth was, she'd always found it hard to refuse him. Her mind drifted back to the first time they'd met, Ethan in a charcoal suit, tie loosened after a long day, eyes shadowed by some unseen burden. She'd been the maid then, barely noticed. But she'd seen him, really seen him, in a way no one else had. His loneliness had matched her own. But as the years passed, that connection had twisted, reshaped itself into something fragile and dangerous. She'd watched him bury himself in his empire, his charm a shield against the world. She'd watched him push Olivia away, and though she'd never spoken it aloud, she'd known why. Control, power, fear, and beneath it all, a darkness she'd glimpsed but never named. She folded the dress and placed it carefully in the suitcase. Then, with trembling hands, she reached into the hidden compartment beneath the lining. A small, tattered envelope emerged, its corners frayed and yellowed. Her breath caught as she held it, the weight of its secrets pressing against her chest. Inside, that envelope lay the remnants of a life she'd tried to forget. Photographs, letters, memories that had no place in Ethan's world. But now, with Olivia's wedding looming, Sophia felt the past pressing closer, threatening to unravel everything she'd built. She pressed the envelope to her heart, eyes glistening. Ethan would never understand. He saw loyalty where there was, sacrifice, kindness where there was survival. He didn't know the choices she'd made, the shadows she carried. A knock at the door startled her. Ethan's voice, muffled but urgent, slipped through the crack. "Sophia, we'll leave at 9. Sharp, be ready." She wiped her eyes, voice steady as she replied, "Yes, Mr. Carrington." Footsteps retreated, and the quiet returned. Sophia slipped the envelope into the hidden compartment, smoothing the lining until it was invisible once more. She closed the suitcase with a soft click. She glanced at her reflection again, searching for the woman she'd become, the one who had agreed to attend the wedding of the man she'd once dared to dream about. The woman who had secrets that could destroy them both. Sophia took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She would go to that wedding. She would stand by Ethan's side. But she would not forget who she was or what she carried. In the hush of her room, she whispered to herself, "This is my story too." And with that, she turned out the light, the envelope hidden, but not forgotten, as the city outside pulsed with secrets waiting to be revealed. The wedding venue glowed with an opulence that made even Ethan's empire seem small. Crystal chandeliers bathed the marble floors in warm light, each surface reflecting 1,000 tiny fires. A string quartet played softly in the background, their notes weaving through the hushed conversations of the wealthy guests who milled about glasses of champagne in hand. Sophia stepped through the arched doorway at Ethan's side, the hush of the crowd trailing behind them like a curtain drawn back on a new scene. She'd never imagined she would be here, in this world of designer gowns and tailored suits. Yet here she was, her simple black dress transformed with subtle jewelry Ethan had insisted she wear. She felt every eye on her, though they didn't know her name. Ethan walked with his usual practiced confidence, but his jaw was tight, his eyes hard. She could feel the tension in the way his fingers grazed her arm, a silent question in his grip. "Are you ready for this?" She didn't answer, aloud. She simply squared her shoulders and held his gaze, offering the strength he couldn't find in himself. Across the room, Olivia shone like a star in her shimmering white gown, her laughter light and practiced. Her new husband, Samuel, stood, proudly at her side, his smile a perfect accessory to the image of marital bliss. But Sophia saw the flicker in Olivia's eyes when they met Ethan's. A flash of regret, or guilt, or perhaps something even darker. Sophia watched Ethan's face harden as he took in the scene. His ex-fiancée, his former best friend, united in a tableau of betrayal. The moment was too perfect to be real. She felt the simmer of old wounds under his carefully composed mask. As they approached the receiving line, Olivia's eyes widened in shock at the sight of Sophia. Her gaze swept over the black dress, the subtle pearls, the quiet strength in Sophia's posture. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, quickly replaced by a brittle smile. "Ethan," Olivia greeted, her voice warm and bright. "I didn't expect to see you here." Ethan's lips curved in a cold smile. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," he said. His tone dripped with a charm that only she, and perhaps Sophia, knew was laced with poison. Olivia's gaze shifted to Sophia, her brow arching delicately. "And who is this?" Sophia met her stare without flinching. "I'm his guest," she said softly, her voice steady. A beat passed, long enough for the tension to thicken. Then Olivia's smile faltered just enough for Sophia to see it. She turned to greet the next guest, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Sophia felt Ethan's hand tighten around hers. His thumb brushed against her knuckles, a silent thank you or perhaps a silent apology. She didn't know. But in that moment she knew her presence had changed everything. The reception hall buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. But beneath the surface, shadows shifted. Every glance felt loaded with questions. Every smile, a potential weapon. Ethan stood tall, his pride a shield against the whispers. But Sophia sensed the storm brewing in his heart. She wondered if he knew the truth. That sometimes, even the most carefully constructed empires crumble from within. She clutched her small, tattered envelope in her purse, its weight a reminder of the secret she carried. As the orchestra swelled and the first dance began, Sophia's eyes found Ethan's. She saw the pain in his gaze, the fury, and something else, something that looked like fear. She held his gaze and whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." The reception hall glittered like a dream, every surface reflecting the golden glow of chandeliers that hung overhead like jeweled crowns. Waiters in crisp white shirts glided between the tables, refilling glasses and offering delicacies that seemed too pretty to eat. Laughter drifted like smoke, a soft haze that couldn't quite cover the tension sparking in the air. Sophia sat at Ethan's side, her posture straight, but her hands clenched in her lap. The tattered envelope nestled in her purse felt like a stone pressing against her heart. Across the table, Olivia and Samuel glowed with the polished shine of new love. But Sophia saw the tiny cracks, the way Olivia's smile wavered at the edges, the way Samuel's eyes darted to Ethan with a mix of guilt and challenge. A hush fell as Samuel stood, glass raised high, his smile practiced but tight. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth. "Tonight I want to celebrate not just the love Olivia and I share, but the bonds of friendship that have brought us all together." His eyes flickered toward Ethan, a glimmer of challenge, sparking there. "Especially old friends who've taught us so much about loyalty and forgiveness." Ethan's jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around the stem of his glass. Sophia felt the shift in him, the barely contained fury. She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, don't—" But it was too late. Ethan rose, his movements slow and deliberate. The room seemed to hold its breath as he raised his glass, his eyes locked on Samuel. "To friendship," he said, his voice sharp as a blade, "and to the choices we make, the ones that define who we really are." He turned his gaze to Olivia, his smile cold. "May we always have the courage to live with the consequences of those choices." A ripple ran through the guests, a murmur of confusion, then a spark of understanding. Olivia's face blanched, her lips parting in a silent gasp. Samuel's hand fell to her arm, but she didn't seem to notice. Sophia's heart raced as she watched Ethan's carefully constructed mask slip, revealing the raw wound beneath. The power he wielded with words, the darkness that simmered just below the surface. This was the man she'd always known him to be. The orchestra faltered, the violin's note stretching thin before dying in the heavy air. A single glass shattered in the distance, the sound sharp as a gunshot. Ethan lowered his glass, his eyes cold. "To Olivia and Samuel," he said, his voice softer now but no less lethal. "May you find happiness, though I doubt you'll ever find peace." He sat, the tension in the room crackling like a live wire. Olivia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her hands trembling in her lap. Samuel glared at Ethan, his jaw tight, but said nothing. Sophia reached for Ethan's hand under the table, her fingers brushing his. He didn't pull away, but his grip was cold, distant, a man who'd found the sharp edge of his own bitterness. As the guests shifted uncomfortably, the orchestra resumed, the music a strained attempt to mend what couldn't be healed. Sophia glanced at her purse, the envelope hidden within. Secrets had a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply they were buried. And tonight, she could feel the past clawing its way into the present, one bitter toast at a time. The music faded to a low hum, the laughter thinning like smoke in a cold wind. Sophia followed Ethan as he slipped away from the reception hall, his movements sharp and deliberate, each step a testament to the fury boiling just beneath his skin. The garden outside the venue was quiet, the moon casting long silver shadows over the manicured hedges and marble statues. Ethan stopped by a low stone fountain, the water's gentle trickle offering a fragile kind of calm. He pressed his palms against the cool stone, his head bowed, breath ragged. Sophia lingered a few steps behind, her fingers clutching the edge of her purse, the envelope inside a silent weight. "You shouldn't have said that," she said softly, her voice threading the night air like a confession. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, the sound brittle. "Shouldn't have said what? The truth?" He turned, his face pale, eyes glinting with a pain she'd only seen hints of before. They deserved to hear it. Sophia stepped closer, the grass damp beneath her shoes. "Maybe. But you did it for yourself, Ethan. Not for closure, not for healing. You wanted to hurt them just like they hurt you." His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking at the corner of his mouth. "You think you know me that well?" Her heart ached. "I do." She paused, her voice trembling. "I've seen the way you bury your pain under anger, the way you push everyone away so no one can hurt you again." His eyes flickered, a shadow crossing his features. "And what about you, Sophia?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "What secrets are you hiding?" The words struck like a blade. Sophia felt her breath catch, the envelope inside her purse suddenly a burning brand. She closed her eyes, gathering the strength she'd carried for so long. "You don't get to ask that," she whispered. "Not after everything you've done." Ethan's laugh was hollow, echoing in the night. "Everything I've done? You don't know half of it." She took a step forward, her voice trembling but strong. "Then tell me," she demanded. "Tell me why you let her go. Why you let everything fall apart. Why you're so determined to destroy yourself and everyone around you." For a moment, Ethan looked like a man on the edge of a cliff, desperate to jump but terrified of the fall. He turned back to the fountain, his shoulders slumping. "I loved her," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "But I couldn't be who she needed me to be. I needed control. I needed to build something no one could take from me. I chose that over her. Over everything." Sophia's heart cracked. She reached for his hand, her touch gentle. "It's not too late to be honest, Ethan. To be the man you promised you'd be." He looked at her then, his eyes dark and vulnerable. "And what about you?" he asked. "What are you hiding?" Her hand fell away, the moment shattering like glass. The envelope in her purse felt impossibly heavy now, its secrets pulsing in the darkness. "Another time," she whispered. "Right now, it's your turn." Ethan closed his eyes, his breath ragged. I don't know how, he confessed. I don't know how to stop being the villain. Sophia's heart ached as she whispered, then maybe it's time to let someone else help you. She reached for his hand again, and this time, he didn't pull away. Sophia lay awake in her small guest room at the mansion, the moonlight stretching across the ceiling like silver chains. Ethan had retreated to his study hours ago, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the steady thrum of her own heart. The night was thick with unanswered questions, and the weight of choices she could no longer outrun. Her hand rested on the tattered envelope hidden in her purse. The edges were frayed, the paper yellowed from years of careful hiding. She had carried it like a relic, a secret that both protected her and threatened to destroy everything she'd built. Now, with Ethan's confession echoing in her mind, she wondered if it was time to finally let it see the light. She rose quietly, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and spread its contents. On the small desk near the window, photographs. Olivia and Samuel, arms around each other, their smiles secretive and damning. Each date marked before the day Olivia had left Ethan. Love letters, written in Olivia's careful script, declarations of passion that revealed a betrayal Ethan had never seen coming. Sophia's chest tightened. She had found the evidence years ago while cleaning Ethan's study, a hidden folder behind a loose panel in his bookshelf. She'd read every word, felt every heartbreak, but had tucked it away. Ethan had been too fragile, too angry, too blinded by his pride to hear the truth then. But now he needed to see it. She gathered the papers carefully, smoothing the creases as though that would soften the blow. A knock at her door startled her, the sound slicing through the stillness like a knife. She hesitated, then folded the envelope, shut and slipped it into her purse. Ethan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Shadows clung to his face, giving him a haunted look. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Sophia's fingers tightened around the purse strap. "No," she admitted. "Too much on my mind." He nodded, his eyes darting to the window where the city glowed in the distance. "Mine too," he murmured. "I keep thinking about tonight, about what you said." Her heart clenched. "And?" she whispered. He stepped closer, his gaze locking on hers. "I don't want to be that man anymore, Sophia. I don't want to be the villain." His hand reached out, trembling. "But I don't know how to fix what I've broken." Her throat tightened. She wanted to reach for him, to reassure him, but the envelope in her purse felt like a bomb ticking down to zero. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "the only way to fix something is to face the truth, even if it hurts." His brow furrowed, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" She took a shaky breath. "There's something I need to show you, something I should have shown you a long time ago." She reached into her purse and pulled out the envelope, her hands trembling. Ethan's gaze sharpened, a mix of dread and curiosity. "What is that?" Sophia swallowed hard. "Proof," she whispered. "Proof of who betrayed you, and when. Proof that you've been fighting ghosts you didn't even know existed." His breath caught, the color draining from his face. He reached for the envelope, his hand shaking. "Show me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. And as Sophia handed him the envelope, the shadows of the past finally stepped into the light. The clock ticked like a metronome, its steady rhythm filling the silence that hung between them. Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, the contents of the tattered envelope spread before him like a crime scene. His eyes darted over each photograph, each handwritten note, every timestamp that confirmed the truth he'd refused to see. Sophia stood a few steps away, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if bracing for the storm she'd unleashed. She'd watched Ethan build his empire on ambition and control, and now she watched as the foundation cracked beneath the weight of his own past. Ethan's hands trembled as he lifted a photograph. Olivia and Samuel in a private embrace. Smiles, meant for each other, not for him. His jaw tightened, and a guttural sound escaped his throat. Half laugh, half sob. He dropped the photo as if it had burned him. "She lied to me," he whispered, his voice raw. "All those nights I thought she was working late, or visiting. Her sister. She was with him. His eyes lifted to Sophia's, a question in them that she couldn't answer. "I tried to tell you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I tried to find the right time, but you were always so sure you knew everything." His eyes blazed, anger sparking like flint. "And you just watched? You just let me hate myself for driving her away?" Her breath caught, tears stinging her eyes. "You weren't ready to hear it. You were so angry, so proud, you would have destroyed yourself if you'd known." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, papers scattered like dead leaves in a windstorm. "So you decided to protect me?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "You decided you knew what was best for me?" Sophia's heart ached. "I wanted to protect you from the worst of it, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe you needed to see the truth for yourself." He ran a hand through his hair, his face pale and drawn. "The truth," he spat. "The truth is that everyone I've ever loved has betrayed me." His voice trembled. "Even you," Sophia recoiled as if struck. "I've never betrayed you," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been here, every day, trying to help. You hold it all together." He shook his head, his eyes wild. "You kept secrets. You chose what I could and couldn't know. That's betrayal, Sophia. That's control." His voice cracked on the last word, pain etched into every syllable. She stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "Ethan, please," but he turned away, his shoulders slumping under the weight of the revelations. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he whispered, more to himself than to her. The man who built an empire? The man who pushed away everyone who tried to love him? Or the fool who believed a lie? Sophia's tears spilled over, her chest aching. "You're all of those things," she said. "But you're also the man who can choose what he becomes next." He turned to her then, his eyes rimmed with red, a man broken but not beyond repair. "And what if I can't?" he asked, his voice trembling. She reached for him, her hand finding his. "Then I'll help you," she whispered. "One step at a time." The clock ticked on, its steady rhythm promising that the night would pass, that morning would come, and that maybe, just maybe, healing could begin. The first light of dawn filtered through the sheer curtains, painting the room in soft, forgiving hues. Ethan sat slumped on the edge of his bed, the remnants of the night's chaos scattered at his feet. Photographs and letters lay like broken promises, each one a testament to the lies he'd built his life upon. Sophia stood by the window, arms folded across her chest, the tension in her shoulders slowly dissolving into quiet strength. Her eyes were tired but steady, the worry lines on her forehead softening as she watched Ethan struggle with his own reflection. He finally looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "How did I not see it?" he rasped, his voice brittle as glass. "How did I let them do this to me?" Sophia's gaze softened, her heart aching. "Because you wanted to believe in her," she said gently. "You wanted to believe in love even if it was only a shadow of the truth." His laugh was dry, bitter. "Some shadow." He let out a shaky breath, his hands trembling. "I thought I was the one in control. But all I've ever done is build walls to keep people out. And all I've got left is an empire built on loneliness." Sophia crossed the room and knelt in front of him, her hand reaching for his. He didn't pull away this time, his fingers curling around hers like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. "You're not alone, Ethan," she whispered. "You never were." His eyes searched hers, a question there that neither of them could quite put into words. "Why are you still here, Sophia?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "After everything I've done? Why stay?" Her smile was small, but fierce, a flicker of light in the darkness that surrounded them. "Because you're more than the worst thing you've ever done," she said, her voice trembling with quiet conviction. "Because I see the man who wants to be better. And because—" Her voice faltered, her eyes glistening. Because I care. More than I should. Ethan's breath caught, a sharp intake of air that seemed to shatter something inside him. He closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. I don't deserve that, he whispered. Sophia shook her head, her thumb brushing the tear away. No one really does, she said. But that's not the point. The point is what you do next. He opened his eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they were clear, vulnerable, human. And what if I can't fix it? He asked. Her smile widened, gentle and unbreakable. Then you try, she said simply. And I'll be here to help you. A silence settled between them, warm and fragile. The sun rose higher, the light catching in Sophia's hair, turning it to gold. Ethan reached for her hand again, his grip firmer this time. Thank you, he murmured. She squeezed his hand back, her eyes shining. One step at a time, Ethan. We'll face this, together. Outside, the city stirred to life, unaware of the quiet battle waged in that room. And as Ethan and Sophia sat side by side, the past felt a little less heavy. The path ahead still twisted with shadows, but for the first time, there was light, and the smallest flicker of hope. The quiet of the early morning was gone, replaced by the relentless hum of life returning to the mansion. Ethan moved through the corridors like a man lost in the ruins of his own kingdom, each step echoing with the ghosts of promises he could no longer keep. Sophia walked beside him, her presence a calm anchor in the storm. She watched him with quiet, understanding, though her heart ached at the sight of his hollow stare. In the distance, preparations for Olivia's wedding continued, oblivious to the wreckage that had already begun. Ethan paused at the grand staircase, his hand resting on the cool marble banister. I thought I could stand there and watch her say those vows, he said, his voice low, brittle. But now all I see is the lie. Sophia reached for his hand, her fingers warm and steady. Because you know the truth now, she said softly. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. He let out a breath that sounded more like a sob. All these years I told myself I didn't care, that she was just a chapter I'd closed. His eyes met Sophia's, raw and exposed. But seeing those pictures, reading those letters, it's like the wound never closed at all. She swallowed hard, her own voice thick with emotion. Maybe it never did. But you're not that man anymore, Ethan. You're not the man who let her betrayal define him. He looked at her, something flickering in his eyes. A question, a plea for something he couldn't yet name. Then who am I? He asked. If I'm not the man who built this empire, if I'm not the man she loved, who does that make me? Sophia's heart twisted. It makes you the man who survived it, she said. The man who's still here, still fighting to be better. She paused, her voice trembling. The man I believe in. His shoulders slumped, the weight of her words settling on him like a fragile hope. He closed his eyes, exhaling shakily. I don't know if I can be that man, Sophia, he confessed, but I want to try. She smiled, the warmth in her eyes bright enough to push back the shadows. That's enough, she said. For now, that's enough. The door to the garden creaked open, and Olivia stepped in, her face pale and drawn. Her wedding dress shimmered in the dim light, a ghost of the future she'd built on lies. Her eyes locked on Ethan, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Ethan, she said, her voice a fragile tremor. I didn't know you were here. His jaw tightened, his eyes cold. I'm always here, Olivia. Watching. Remembering. He took a step closer, his voice low and steady. And I know everything now. She flinched, tears welling in her eyes. Please, don't do this, she whispered. Not today. But Ethan shook his head, his expression resolute. The truth doesn't care about today, he said. The truth was always going to come out. Sophia watched them, her breath caught in her chest. The air between them felt charged, every word a blade. She knew this was the moment that would shatter whatever fragile piece still lingered. Olivia's shoulders slumped, her lips trembling. "Then do what you have to do," she said softly. "But know this. Whatever you think you're destroying, it was never real to begin with." She turned and walked away, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a promise already broken. And as Ethan watched her go, he felt the last pieces of the past fall away, leaving only the man he was and the woman who still stood beside him. The garden was empty now, the echoes of Olivia's broken vows fading into the morning air. Ethan stood alone beneath the ancient oak, its gnarled branches casting shadows that twisted like old scars across the manicured lawn. The hush that had fallen felt both peaceful and suffocating, a silence that demanded reflection. He stared at the ground, his thoughts tangled in the web of lies and truths that had defined his life for far too long. Olivia's words clung to him like barbed wire. Whatever you think you're destroying, it was never real to begin with. Maybe she was right. Maybe the empire he'd built, the love he'd believed in, was always just smoke and mirrors, a mask he'd worn too long to remember his own face. A soft rustle behind him pulled him from his thoughts. Sophia approached, her steps slow and cautious. Her presence, once something he'd taken for granted, now felt like the only anchor left in a world turned upside down. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, her voice a balm to the rawness in his chest. He let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet. "No," he admitted. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending I was." She moved closer, her eyes searching his face for something she wasn't sure she'd find. "You did what you had to do," she said. "You faced the truth." He met her gaze, the weight of his own failures pressing heavy on his chest. "At what cost?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I've lost everything. The company's reputation will never recover. Olivia's gone, whatever that meant, and now—" His voice trailed off, a lump in his throat. "Now I don't even know who I am anymore." Sophia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Maybe that's what closure is," she whispered. "Letting go of what was never real so you can find what is." He shook his head, pain etched in every line of his face. "But what if there's nothing left to find? What if I'm just a man who ruined everything good that ever came into his life?" She reached out, her hand brushing his cheek, warm and steady. "Then you start over," she said. "You build something new, something real. And you let yourself be human, flaws and all." A single tear slipped down his cheek and he didn't bother to wipe it away. "I don't know how," he confessed, his voice raw. "I've been pretending for so long." Sophia's smile was soft but unyielding, the kind of strength he'd never understood until now. "Then let me help you," she said. "Let me be the one thing in your life that's not built on lies." His breath caught, the possibility of forgiveness and redemption so foreign it hurt to even imagine. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something he'd thought he'd lost forever, a reason to believe in tomorrow. He nodded slowly, his heart cracking open just enough to let the light in. "Okay," he whispered, "one step at a time." She smiled, and the morning sun caught the gold in her hair, turning it into a halo. "That's all any of us can do," she said. And as the first rays of dawn lit the horizon, Ethan felt, for the first time in years, that maybe, just maybe, there was a future waiting for him beyond the wreckage. The sun broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow that banished the last of the night's shadows. Ethan stood at the balcony of his mansion, the city below awakening in a blur of lights and movement. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the weight of his empire pressing on his shoulders. Instead, he felt the fragile threads of something new, something real. Behind him, the soft sounds of morning filtered in, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds, the gentle rustle of curtains in the breeze. Sophia emerged from the hallway, her hair loose around her shoulders, a quiet strength in her step that Ethan found himself admiring. She paused by the door, her eyes meeting his with a question that needed no words. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. Ethan turned to her, his expression open, vulnerable. "Lighter," he said, the word tasting foreign, but welcome. "I thought losing everything would feel like the end of the world, but now, it feels like a chance to start over." Sophia smiled, the warmth of it chasing away the last remnants of the darkness that had haunted him. "It is," she said. "You're not defined by the mistakes you've made. You're defined by what you do now." He let out a slow breath, the tightness in his chest easing. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "You start by forgiving yourself," she whispered. "You start by being the man you've always wanted to be. Not the man who ran from pain or hid behind power, but the man who faced the truth and chose to be better." Her words settled in his heart, a promise of something more than the empire he'd built and lost. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick, "for not giving up on me, for seeing something worth saving." Sophia's eyes glistened, but her smile never wavered. "We've both been through enough lies," she said. "It's time for honesty, for both of us." He nodded, the simplicity of her words more powerful than any speech he'd ever given. "Then let's start today," he said. "Let's build something real together." She took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. "Together," she agreed. They stood there in the golden light of the new day, the city below bustling with the promise of fresh beginnings. The scars of the past still lingered, but they were no longer chains. They were reminders of how far they'd come and how much stronger they'd become. Ethan knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be days when the shadows returned, when doubt would whisper in his ear. But for the first time, he knew he didn't have to face them alone. Sophia would be there, a steady light in the darkest corners of his heart. As the sun climbed higher, Ethan squeezed her hand, a silent vow that whatever came next, he would meet it with open eyes and an honest heart. And with that, he stepped forward, leaving the ruins of his past behind him and walking into the dawn of something he'd never thought he'd find again: hope.